Welcome to the bizval podcast. At bizval, we are passionate about empowering entrepreneurs the world over to understand and unlock the value in their business. We work with advisors and entrepreneurs to demystify the value creation process when building a business. At bizval, we know how tough it is to grow and run a business, which is exactly why we've made valuations simple to understand, accurate, and affordable. Our unique blend of tech and touch ensures that you always receive the best service, authentic human engagement, and data-led insights to ensure that you build a business that provides you with freedom and choice. In the bizval podcast, we showcase stories of real entrepreneurs and advisors, sharing lessons and inspiration from their journeys to make your journey just that little bit easier. Today on the show, we have Brian Foster. Brian is the CEO and founder of the Financial Caddy. As you can hear, with the word caddy, and you can see by his background, he's also a keen golfer, and that's going to come out in the story today. But Brian specifically founded the Financial Caddy to provide direction for financial planning, and in particular when it comes to blended families, which creates a whole new dynamic in the financial planning space. And what complicates it even more is when one of those people in the blended family perhaps owns a business. So today we're going to dive into a bit of that conversation around money, purpose, blended families, and why it's such an important topic. So without any further ado, Brian, welcome to the show. Maybe if you just want to give a quick 30-second introduction before we dive into your story.
Great. Thanks, Graham. It's good to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Introduction. You can tell from my accent probably that I'm not a South African. I originally born in the UK in Oxford, lived there all my life, had a financial planning business, several businesses there, emigrated to South Africa in 2012. So I've been here now 13 years. And I work with private clients as a financial planner. I'm a little bit different to most financial planners, as we'll probably get into. And I also do some coaching work with other financial planners as well. So South African financial planners mostly. And so, that's the sort of potted history.
Fantastic. And I'm sure you get to play a lot more golf in South Africa. The weather's a lot better.
The weather is a lot better. I'm a member at Stellenbosch, actually. So, we do get to play a lot more golf.
Fantastic. So, Brian, you've got a fascinating backstory, to becoming a business owner and an entrepreneur. And, without giving it all away, it involves some golf, it involves some travel, it involves family, and a fair bit of heartbreak and tragedy along the way. And I know it's obviously quite a vulnerable space to go to, but I guess, if you want to be real about these things, you have to acknowledge that. So let's start there. You've got a saying, which I think you've got on your website, which is, as you walk down the fairway of life, you must smell the roses, for you only get to play one round. So let's unpack your journey a little bit. Maybe let's rewind to like the early 2000s, when you were a successful amateur golfer in the UK. What happened from there?
So I was working full-time as a financial planner inside an accountancy practice in a business that I'd co-created with a business partner. I was very good friends with a couple of professional golfers. So golf was kind of, the weekend story. I got really, really good. And I won our club championship for the first time in 2001. And then I won it again in 2003. And I was struck by a question. And the question was, I wonder how good your golf could get if you played and practiced every day, because I was working during the week in the financial planning business. I was playing golf at the weekends, and in the summer, because the summer's a bit longer in the UK, I'd sort of slope off at 4 o'clock if it was possible, grab 9 holes. So this was the burning question, and I decided it was something that I wanted to answer. And a friend of mine, I was speaking to a friend of mine, and he said, well, I've got an apartment in a place called the Strand in South Africa, just outside Cape Town. Why don't you go down there for like 6 months and stay in the apartment? He said, the weather's great. The exchange rate is great. This was 2003. I think the exchange rate was 10 then. Um,
And now it's like
it's
25.
changed. It's changed a bit since. The weather's great. The golf courses are great. Why don't you go down there? It sounded like a really good idea. So I went back to the business and I asked the question. I said, what are the chances of me taking a 6 month sabbatical? And they said, no, I think we can make that happen. And so I got a whole list together of all the things that I needed to do. The accommodation was ticked off. He gave me some people to speak to. I organized work. And, I went through this process. And then my mother gave me a ride to the airport in February 2004. She sort of kissed me goodbye and said, don't forget to write. And I got on a plane and I traveled to South Africa for the first time on my own. And I came to play golf for 6 months.
And I
Um,
guess back then, I mean, there was obviously electronic communications and email and that, but I mean, it was a world sort of pre-social media and Instagram, and I think Facebook
yeah,
only came about in 2007, so it was a very different
yeah,
world.
no, it was internet cafes. So I was
Yeah.
sort of sending emails back on internet cafes. So yeah, so I was here for 6 months. I stayed in Strand, living on the beach. It was fantastic. And back then, so I was playing off for two handicap then. And back then you could play in the Monday qualifiers on the Sunshine Tour off a two handicap. And I played in the first qualifier, got through. The tournament was at De Salza um, here just outside Stellenbosch, which is weird because I live in Somerset West now, so it's just like down the
Down
road.
the road.
Yeah, and I missed the cut, but I was living the dream, Graham. I was
Yeah.
playing in a professional tournament. I was teeing it up with people that I'd heard of, and that was like 2 weeks in. So I spent the next 6 months touring around the country, practicing every day, going to the gym, playing in tournaments, meeting all sorts
Mhm.
of amazing people. I went to Joburg. I played in the Royal Swazi Open. I mean, I played in some crazy places, and I was literally living the dream. It was amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so that was my introduction to South Africa and golf.
I guess you didn't win the $1 million classic in that period.
No, one of the things I realized is that there's a very big difference between being, I was playing off scratch then. There's a very big difference between being a scratch golfer and playing professionally. It's actually a completely different world.
Yeah, yeah.
And no, I didn't make enough money. I didn't make anywhere near enough money. And, there's only a very small proportion of professional golfers that are significantly wealthy.
Yeah.
Um, Most of the guys are just sort of scratching around trying to make a living.
Yeah,
Very
and I
difficult.
think, I mean, maybe to drill down a little bit into that, I mean, often people say, like if you want to make a success of something, follow your passion. And I think there's a lesson in that. I mean, golf was clearly your passion. You were living the dream. But at that
Yep.
point, it certainly wasn't, as you say, you weren't the pro golfer living it up, flying around in private jets. You were scraping to get by. So you followed the passion. And after the
Yep.
6 months, you had to go back to the UK, I understand. And
I did.
and I know it's a bit of a vulnerable moment, but can you share what
No, that's
happened in
okay.
your
Yeah.
in your return to the UK?
Yeah. So I was contracted to go back after 6 months. So, we all knew I was going back.
Yeah,
And I got a flight back to the UK. I called my parents from the airport. I spoke to my mom and I said, my friend Andy's picking me up. He's going to bring me back to your place. I'll see you in about an hour. And then I got back to my parents' house, knocked on the door. My mum opened the door and she basically looked straight through me.
sure.
It was just a really strange moment. And then she sort of said, "Oh, hello, how are you?" And I was like, "I was fine. Uh, what was that?" No, no,
Mm.
no, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And then I had a conversation with my dad, and he said, something's not right. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, my mum was diagnosed with dementia. Um, she had the sort of start of dementia. She was losing her mental capacity, and she was 58 years old.
Sure.
And I'm 57 now. So in
Mm.
January, I'll be 58. I'll be the same age. It's bizarre, really. So yeah, so she was diagnosed with dementia. Within 12 months, she was in full-time nursing care.
Sure.
Um, it it was terrible. Her the degeneration was rapid, and oh, my dad didn't know what to do. He couldn't cope, which was why she ended up in full-time nursing care, and then she
Yeah.
died in that nursing home 4 years later. Um, she was 62, and she was a shell, basically. She had no
Yeah.
mental capacity. And so that was an important moment for me because there I was living the dream in South Africa for 6 months, spending all my own money. I didn't have sponsors, so it was my own money that I was spending. Um, you know, and my mum had retired at the age of 56. She was a legal secretary, and
Mm.
she hated the business in the end, and she just wanted to get out. And we engineered a way for her to do that financially. She never saw a cent of her retirement money, Graham.
Sure.
And so, that sort of position, um, me living the dream, coming back, my mum's sort of degeneration. The thing that's really bizarre about that is, you know, it destroyed my dad's retirement as well. He's
Mm.
84 now. Yeah,
Yeah.
85 this year. He's basically been sitting in front of the TV for the last 15 years, complaining about whatever he sees on the news. He's got no meaning. He's got no purpose. The thing
I'm
that
not
he
laughing
was,
at you, but I mean, it's such a British thing that you.
I know, it's crazy. So my mum's illness destroyed both of their concepts of what
Yeah.
retirement was supposed to be. And that had a really significant impact on me and the conversations that I was having with my clients about
Mm.
what are we saving for? What's the purpose? What does it mean? Because you don't know what you're going to get, right? My
Yeah,
my
and
dad
I think
comes,
there's such a profound point in that, I mean, I guess we kind of there was a generation where it was like work hard, save for retirement, and then live the golden years. That's the narrative that's put out there.
yeah,
And the same when it comes to business owners, it's like work hard, sell your business, and then enjoy the fruits. But I think you're going to lead into that now, Brian. Yeah, I guess as you say, there was a penny drop moment where actually. No, that's not the only way. And in fact, it's probably not even the best way to think about retirement and wealth creation. And you talk about that, the why question, why are you doing
mm,
this? And so you can travel the
yeah,
world in a wheelchair when you're 85 years old. No. Okay. So
yeah,
let's share how that kind of, as you say, that then had sort of a moment for you, change your
mm,
perspective. We haven't even got into blended families yet. That's still to come.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
share how that kind of shifted your approach and your mindset and what happened after that.
So at that time, we'd considered ourselves a financial planning business, but we were still in the traditional financial services industry where the vast majority of the conversations were about investments. And there's this idea that financial advisors are all about insurance and investments, and to some
Mm.
extent that's actually true. We saw ourselves as financial planners, but the conversations we were having were still really primarily around the sort of investment piece. um, it struck me that that wasn't a deep enough conversation. And
Mm.
I think most people, most people probably don't like the idea of having a sort of deep, meaningful conversation about life, the world, and the universe. We quite like the safety of logical financial, you know,
Put away
calculations.
15% and you'll be fine one day.
Exactly. That's a nice, easy conversation for people to have. But it wasn't enough for me anymore. And, I started having deeper conversations with clients and asking them, actually, why are you working in this business? Um, and I got some really interesting answers. I remember one client who was 70. I was saying to him, why haven't you retired yet? You're 70. And he said to me, "Hmm." And it was sort of a joke, but it wasn't really. He said to me, when I married my wife, I signed up for breakfast and dinner. I didn't sign up for lunch as well. And what he was actually saying to me was, I'm not entirely sure I could cope with a relationship with my wife like all day, every day. Um, and I think, that's the sort of stuff that we need to confront because that's what's going to happen when you get to this thing called retirement. And
Mm,
so it's in those messy conversations that I think we find meaning and purpose and what really matters. And that's different for everybody. But those are the conversations that I then wanted to have.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that led to deeper relationships, more interesting work for me. Um, and in many ways, it's a lot more challenging. But I think that's a better conversation to have as a financial planner. Um,
yeah. It's not an easy one, but
and
it's a necessary one. We have a saying with our business that we will always tell our clients what they need to hear, not what they necessarily want to hear. And it's a fine line because sometimes it is tough and sometimes it's hard. But if you can crack that in an empathetic and
yeah,
you know, clear way, you can then go deeper. So what happened next in you? So you've had this epiphany. You're thinking, okay, started with different conversations in your work context, but you're now
yeah.
still back in the UK. What
Yep.
happened next, Brian?
Three things happened in quick succession. I got engineered out of the business by my business partner, which was, I guess that happens to lots of people in business, right?
Yeah,
You sort of think that you're heading in a particular direction, something happens, you're not paying attention, the next thing you know, that's gone. Then my mum died, and then my partner, with whom I had two children, who is South African, left the relationship and brought the children to South Africa. The children were 3 and 1. I was devastated, and I sat there with my head in my hands, thinking, "Well, what now?"
mm,
And there were basically two choices. Um, you stay in the UK, and I'd then created another financial planning business, and you run your financial planning business without the kids. 3 years old, my youngest son had just had his first birthday, or you go back to South Africa and you start again. And here I am.
and I guess at that stage, just to emphasize the point, it was pre-Zoom and pre all of these sorts of things, So like, just for the context of where we are at now.
Yeah,
It wasn't as easy to maintain relationships and that across
no,
geographies, right?
no, that was 2012. We just got
Yeah,
into 2012.
yeah,
And so again, now at that point, I'm now confronted by the meaning of money. So there I
yeah,
was, 4 bedroom detached house. I was driving a Porsche, and on the face of it, I had all the things that you would define as success,
yeah,
but I didn't have the things that really mattered. And one of the things that I found as I went through that experience was, what's the purpose of money? What's driving this set of decisions that you're making? And for
yeah,
me, it was maintaining the relationship with my children. And so when things got really difficult, as they inevitably do when you suddenly go through this process, um, and you move halfway around the world and you sell everything that you've got and you give a load of stuff away, and you turn up with two suitcases and your golf clubs, nothing else. These golf clubs, actually, these are the ones. And
The same ones, wow.
yeah, they're still here. And so when I talk to clients, I always say that, whatever you're doing with your money, there needs to be a compelling reason behind that. It needs to really matter for you to be sort of pulled along by that vision and purpose and meaning. And for me, that was the relationship with the children.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
yeah,
so obviously there's been a lot of reframing that's happened, yeah. And I'm going to fast forward a little bit, and we'll touch on some of the other elements of the story as we go through some of the questions. But your definition growing up of financial success, as you say, was probably the Porsche in the drive, the 4-bedroom detached house, playing golf on the weekends. Okay, you didn't quite make it as a pro, but can still hold your own at the club champs. Um,
yeah,
and circumstances happened, and suddenly a lot of that stuff was gone. Um,
yeah,
and this notion of having a nice big nest egg for retirement that you can, retire early at 50 or 55, and that the illusion of that's also gone. Okay.
yeah, exactly.
Life happened. So with all of that's happened, like how did that shape your definition of financial success? So, very direct question, like how would you
Hmm.
define financial success now, knowing what you know now, as opposed to what you thought it might have been 30 years ago?
That's a great question. I think I think it's evolved. So when I got to South Africa, I was in a bit of a dark place, actually. Um, so I had uh, a sort of 6 month period where I was, you know, drinking brandy and frying chops every day and not doing an awful lot else. And then you sort of get this, you know, you get this wake
If
up
I can
call.
interrupt you, that was just acclimatizing to becoming a South African.
Yeah, well, I was sharing a house with an Afrikaans guy, and he taught me how to braai. So, I mean, that's the way it goes in South Africa, right? So, there was a complete reset really for me, and then a couple of other things happened. Eventually, as I came out of this sort of dark place, and I got into doing some work, and um, I then met my now wife, and she introduced me to faith, to a relationship with God, which I didn't
Yeah.
have in the UK. And so that was a massive that was a massive that had a massive impact on me. And then obviously, business stuff started, and strangely, years later, you find yourself having accumulated another house full of stuff, which is kind of strange, really. And then I got baptized in 2019, so I'm deeper into my faith.
Yeah.
And so my definition of financial success now is probably more time to do the things that matter to me. My wife and I have, so this is a blended family story. So I've got teenage boys, 16 and 14, and I've got 2.5-year-old twin girls, and a wife and an ex with whom I have a challenging relationship. Um, and so, what's the definition of financial success now? It doesn't look like what it looked like many, many years ago. The
Yeah.
Porsche's gone. I have no interest in cars. Um, the time that I play golf is now more precious.
Mm.
Um, my relationship with the kids is more important. My relationship with my wife is more important. The work that I'm doing with the people that I'm doing it with is more important. Um, so everything's changed.
Yeah, I
Everything has
think
changed.
I don't know if it was it Steve Jobs. I think when he was on his, it's often quoted, when he was on his deathbed. I mean, I guess one of the world's wealthiest guys at that point in
Mm.
time, said something similar. If he could do it all over again, he would have focused on different things. And I think that's an important point, is that wealth and money is an enabler to do stuff. It's to do good in the
Mm.
world. It's not, it shouldn't be an ego thing. And so when you have that kind of mindset shift around money, and it doesn't mean that it's not a good thing to think about that, but it shouldn't be your obsession. They say the love of money is the problem.
Love
So
of
you've had
money
the
is the
shift
root of
now to
all
say
evil.
it's an enabler, and then it leads you a little bit into the mission behind the Financial Caddy. Okay,
Yeah,
so maybe we can just
yeah,
touch a little bit on that, Brian. So you've
yeah,
had an intersection of faith, passion, purpose, crisis have all come together.
yeah.
Um, what now?
So the Financial Caddy it's an interesting thing. It started actually in the UK just before I came to South Africa, and it sort of sat on my laptop for a few years while I got here and sorted myself out. I was speaking at an event uh, for financial advisors, and I was talking about the nature of the conversations that I was having with clients, deeper conversations, financial planning, rather than just selling products. And somebody said to me, Brian, you don't understand, it's different in South Africa. Uh, Clients won't pay fees for advice.
Mm,
And I said, I don't believe that's true. It depends what you mean by advice, but I don't believe that's true. And so I decided to sort of set up an experiment, and I set up the Financial Caddy. I was introduced to some clients. They were blown away by the conversations we were having and the kind of things they wanted to get resolved in their lives, and were
mm,
happy to pay for it. And then I thought, I need to do more of this. But what also happened, this was an important part of the process for me, was I didn't want to get back into selling insurance and investment products.
yeah.
So the Financial Caddy it very deliberately doesn't have a license to sell. It's not an FSP. It's not a financial services provider that has a license to sell products. So
Yeah.
all of the work that I do is strategic planning and coaching around what does a great life look like for you as a couple, as a family? Have
Mm,
you even thought about what that means? A personal financial strategy. So most business owners, in my experience, regard personal finance as something to attend to later.
yeah.
I'm busy in the business. I'm building a business. This is my wealth creation engine.
And
You,
and and,
you
and
flat out,
I'll sell it one day. It'll solve all my
yeah,
financial problems.
yeah. My personal financial stuff is a problem to solve. When then one day comes along and you realize you haven't done all the things you're supposed to have done.
Yeah.
And so what does a great life look like for you? What is the personal financial strategy that's likely to get you there? What
Yeah.
does that look like? And then the third piece is, what are your beliefs? What is your psychology? How do you feel? How do you behave around money? Because you can have a great vision and you can have a great personal financial strategy, but if you're tripping yourself up along the way because you're not
Mm,
behaving well, or your thinking isn't solid, um, especially if you're in a couple, and especially if you're in a couple with a blended family, because you've got all of that emotional stuff that's going on around you, other people's baggage. So the mission for the Financial Caddy is really to help people get through that process. And the reason I use the name the Financial Caddy is, if you think about the nature of a relationship between a golf professional and their caddy, it's like you and me against the rest of the world
yeah.
in the heat of battle. We've got a strategy. We know what good looks like for this round or this tournament or whatever it's going to be. And the caddy's role is to help define the strategy and keep the player on the straight and narrow, because inevitably at some point in the round the player's going to hit the ball in a place they didn't expect it to. And when that happens, there's a conversation, and what are we going to do now? So that's sort of conceptually what the Financial Caddy is all about, and the mission is to help people create personal financial strategies.
Fantastic. So I'm gonna ask a couple more questions, and first one's a bit of a long question, but
Okay.
so as you said, the focus is around financial planning and strategies, but
Yeah.
with an emphasis on blended families, obviously shaped by your own background and experience.
Mm.
So, yeah, very open-ended question, like what makes financial planning more complex in these situations? And, what are maybe some of the misconceptions that people have when, you know, dealing with blended families, financially speaking? Yeah, address it as you will.
Yeah. Okay. So what makes it more complex? There are a lot more moving parts.
Mm,
Um, Consent and maintenance orders, with the kids, all the emotion that goes with that, extended families, you know, if the grandparents are still alive, you might have two sets of grandparents,
yeah, well, four
and
cents.
then you get married and you get four sets. Yeah, exactly. Um, so, there's a lot more moving parts. There's a lot more complexity. There's a lot more to think about.
Two,
Um,
two, 2 year
there's
olds, 2.5 year olds at 57, so,
2.5-year-olds at
so,
57. I
so, so
mean,
that early
my
retirement's not happening.
my golf buddies are all like, "Oh, we're getting the kids off our hands now. I can play more golf." And I'm like, "Dude, I'm just going, I'm just going back in." I get something else, of course, which they don't have, which is to re-experience the innocence of 2.5-year-olds, and
Yeah,
putting them to bed. And it's hard work, but there's all of that as well. And so it's just a much more complex environment, and I love that complexity because in that complexity are all the senses, fear, shame,
mm,
um, all the things maybe that you think you've done wrong or you think you might do wrong, and like the narrative isn't supposed to look like this. The
yeah,
narrative isn't that you're supposed to have kids, 2.5-year-old kids, when you're 57 years old, and it's like, but there's nothing wrong with that. Life can go in any particular direction you want it to.
yeah,
Um, so I think, there's a lot more moving parts, and the emotional and psychological complexity, and blended families come from death or divorce, typically.
mm,
I mean, it, it's emotional,
yeah,
and I've got baggage. I've had psychotherapy sessions,
yeah,
right? Because I can't often see the wood for the trees, and I need somebody to help me figure out how that, is supposed to all fit together in my mind and what I'm supposed to do now. So, um, none of us are the complete experts. And so I think having somebody that, you can have a relationship with who
mm.
is motivated simply to help you try and find a way through all that, which is what the Financial Caddy is about, um, I think is important. So
And I
yeah,
guess
a lot more.
dealing with the financial aspects there are, as you say, there's that complexity. It's not as simple as, hey, work for 40 years, and we'll talk about owning a business now as well. Tuck away some money for retirement, have a bit of life insurance, tuck away some money for your in an endowment policy for your kids, studies, and go cruise the world when you hit 60. You've got more expenses,
Mm.
you've got more uncertainty, you've got all those sorts of things. And I think the traditional products and solutions and services don't actually cater for that, so it's a
Yeah,
massive underserved need. And I suppose people turn in those situations to things like alcohol and
yeah.
whatever your vice is to deal with that. And getting this practical wisdom, advice, and maybe I think sometimes, Brian, even just a listening ear, can be incredibly helpful from a personal and a financial perspective.
Yeah, I think that's right. A lot of people, when you come to a financial advisor, normally, the advisor's mentality is, I've got to give you the correct answer.
Yeah,
My approach, first of all, is I can't give you any answers to a lot of these things until we've understood who you are. And actually, you've probably got the answers inside you. It's more of a coaching relationship, really.
yeah,
Uh, So let's try and get you some clarity around, what the future looks like, what you'd like the future to look like, where you are at the minute, and
Mm.
what needs to happen in order to get you there. There may be some product related, policy related, investment related stuff, that's fine. I can talk to people about that intelligently, but I'm not interested in setting up policies. So we may well pull people in
Yeah.
to get those sort of things done. It's not like there's not a lot of people, there's a lot of people out there that are able to do that. So, we're a bit spoiled for choice. So,
100%. Brian, I mean,
yeah,
to maybe just wrap up, and I think we're going to have to get you back for another show because there's so many different angles and paths we can go down here, and I think as we were prepping for the show, maybe underestimated like just all the different rabbit holes you can go down. I do want to ask
yeah,
final question just around blended families and particularly blended families where there is a business owner involved. Okay, so and maybe you can just share a story or two or just some thoughts on why it's important to understand things like business valuation, things, like in a blended family situation, what are some of the things that happen where if
yeah.
you're not properly equipped to understand your business and the value and all that around that can end up in disaster. And then we can wrap up from there.
Okay. So I've actually got a case that I've been working on recently. So one of my clients introduced me to his father. He said, "My father really needs help. He's 79 years old, um, and there's two sides to the family. So he was originally married, um,
Mm,
and they had three children. And so that's my client is on that side. He's one of the children, and they're all grown up now. They're all in their 40s and 50s.
yeah.
And uh, they got divorced, and he met somebody else, and he then had another family, and there's four children on that side. So there's seven. I think there's seven kids. I
Wow.
say kids. They're
All
all grown up.
adults. Yeah.
Yeah. And in this process, he's 79. He still owns the business, but there are three businesses, and all the children work in those businesses,
Mm,
and there's there's no succession plan, there's no estate plan, there's quite a lot of life assurance, um, but Dad he's got no idea really how this thing is going to work once he's gone, and the children are now panicking because
mm,
they all work in these businesses and they don't know what's going to happen. And
mm,
so he I think has buried his head in the sand and is hoping that it's all going to be okay.
mm,
And now you're starting to see the relationship changes between the children because there's one of the children who has a legal background, was a lawyer, I think, in a previous life, who is now causing trouble and clearly wants to take ownership of at least one of the businesses, if not all of them. And
yeah.
now you're seeing alliances, you know, and it has massive implications for the family. And Dad is basically got has basically gone, this is a bit difficult. I don't think I want to go there. And we've been trying to get him to come and have the conversation at least and put together a proper estate plan, succession plan, but he's struggling to have the conversation. And I say that's probably because for him, it's all emotional.
Yeah.
He's
And I guess,
struggling to deal with those things. Yeah, it's not a
yeah, I mean, I guess
financial.
it's at 79 as well. He's, it's harder to do it then, so the longer you leave it, the more difficult these things become, right?
Right, absolutely. But he's going to leave that problem with all of the family. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that they've sort of resigned themselves to the fact that it's going to be chaos. But I mean, the actual the business valuations were, yeah, they were significant, tens of millions of rands for the business.
Mm, mm.
So that's a situation where I haven't been able to help. Um, but I mean, clients have got to want to come and they've got to identify the issues and they've got to want to come and solve those things. We can only help
But I think
if
that's the point, is that's real life, right? And that's what happens. And there's such a need. And I guess
yeah.
sometimes people don't know what they don't know before it's too late, you know. So sometimes you have to share these almost horror stories to get people to take action, you know. So
And
Brian,
there are thousands of them. There are thousands and thousands of them. Yeah.
yeah, 100%. So Brian, just to recap on today, you know, I think you know, one, I want to thank you just for, you know, I guess being vulnerable and sharing the story. I just, you know, when I first met you, I thought this is just a story that needs to be shared. So I just appreciate your candor and your honesty and your vulnerability in sharing the story for one. I think there's some key takeaways here around just being purpose driven in your planning. You know, the
Yeah.
reality of the complexity of blended families. Nobody plans to have a blended family. It's life. It happens.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you know, the role of actually understanding business and complexity. If you don't deal with things like valuation and succession planning. I mean, there's a reason the show Succession was so popular on what is it, on HBO, I think, because you know, it kind of makes light or drama of these situations. But I think we're going to have to schedule a follow-up because I just think there's so much stuff that we can dive into.
Okay. Yeah.
But before that, can you maybe just share where our listeners can connect with you, how they can learn
Yeah.
more about the Financial Caddy, and yeah, how they could reach out if they have any questions?
Okay, great. Thanks. So the Financial Caddy has a website. It's financialcaddy.com, and caddy is spelled CADDIE. It's the proper spelling, not the American spelling. So financialcaddy.com, and you'll find me on LinkedIn. I'm not massively big on social media, but you'll find some interesting things probably on LinkedIn. Brian Foster, Financial Planner, will get you there. And there's some contact details with my email address on the website, which is still relatively new, and needs developing, as I suppose, you know, these things do. And I want to say thank you for getting me on the show, Graham. You know, I have no problem sharing the vulnerability issues. That's, like you say, it's real life, and I hope that there was something in there for anybody that's watching or listening that's useful.
Fantastic. Brian, I'm going to give you one final thought. You know, in one sentence, you know, what do you want business owners in blended families to know about money?
Well, the quote is the Ben Hogan quote. As you walk down the fairway of life, you must smell the roses because you only get one round.
Fantastic. With that, Brian, we'll chat again soon. Have a wonderful evening, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Graham.